We are responsible for reigniting and reinventing our life as much as we can do.
Business of Architecture, episode 202.
Hello, I'm Enoch Sears, and this is the podcast for architects, where you'll discover tips, strategies, and secrets for running a profitable and impactful architecture practice. I'd like to invite you to discover how to double your architecture firm income and create your dream practice of freedom and impact by downloading my free 4-part architecture firm profit map. As a podcast listener, you can get instant access by going to freearchitectgift.com. Today's podcast is sponsored by AIA Advantage partner BQE Software, the makers of ArchiOffice. ArchiOffice is the only office and project management software designed specifically for architects. It helps you manage people and projects while you focus on designing great architecture. So whether you're working remotely or on-site, ArchiOffice allows you to monitor the status of your projects and tasks and send out invoices in an accurate and timely manner. Get your fully functional 15-day trial of ArchiOffice by going to businessofarchitecture.com/demo. Today I speak with Sally Arnold, an Australian-based business coach whose father actually was an architect in New Zealand. So without further ado, let's jump into today's episode. Sally, welcome to Business of Architecture.
Thank you, Enoch.
So tell me about your business career. I want to go back in time a little bit. I always like learning about people's voyages and their journeys. And, basically I saw in your bio that you started out as a performer, a musical performer, and then you opened up a store. So tell me about that transition in your life.
Okay, so, I originally come from Christchurch in New Zealand, so I was born there, and I came across to Australia, to Adelaide, to go to university when I was 18, because I was a young, promising musician, a flute player. And so I studied in Adelaide for 3 years and then went to Sydney, worked in Sydney in the original Jesus Christ Superstar show. So I went from being a classical musician to in a rock band. Then went to London and studied, came back to Australia, worked at the Sydney Opera House. And it was only during that stage that I realised that I had a slight hearing problem. I'd sort of known about it, so I decided that rather than being kicked out of an orchestra, I would go into another career. And this is a lot about the work that I do. It's about reinventing yourself. So I decided that food was one of my passions. And when I was 26, I opened up a gourmet cookware shop. And so that shop sold sort of top-end quality gourmet cookware. That was in Melbourne. And I had that for 3 years. And during that time, some guys who had sort of done up a really tired department store, a bit like a Bergdorf's or something like that, sort of an old-fashioned Bergdorf's. And so they approached me about coming in and really redoing their whole homewares area. And so I joined them for 3 years. And
so Sally, I'm just gonna pause you there because I always like to dig into someone's first entrepreneurial experience. It sounds like your homeware store was your first venture into entrepreneurship. And I'd like to ask you, what were some of the challenges, looking back on that time period, what were some of the challenges of doing that venture and some of the lessons you learned from that experience?
Okay, the challenges were at 26, I financed it basically myself, so that was a major challenge. I was over in Australia on my own. My family was in New Zealand, so I had to really put everything that I had basically into that venture. So that was a major challenge. I had no regular income, so I had to trust that the shop or the store would work really well. And so that firstly financing it myself at the age of 26. Secondly, going into an area that I really didn't know much about. I hadn't been in retail, so I've been a musician, I've been a performer sitting on stage, so I really knew very little about the retail industry. So for me, it was about I had to learn. And in those days there wasn't Google, there wasn't anything. So I had to learn as much as I could about food and cooking, even though it might have been a passion. I had to delve into who was the best, who produced the best cookware. So I had to do a lot of research, which meant phone calls. That's what it was in my day. So that was one of the things. And then I had to work out what were the products that I was going to put into that store. And I had to be very, very specific because it was only a small store and I wanted it to be very niche orientated. I wanted to have really good design products, really top end of the range, but they had to be beautiful products. And so those were some of the lessons. And it was, but I mean, I must admit, I felt sick at times. I felt quite sick thinking this is what I've put myself forward for. But, you know, there wasn't any way backwards because I couldn't go back into an orchestra and I didn't want to teach the flute. So it was onwards and upwards.
And how did you feel you grew during that time?
Oh, I became very resourceful. I became very resilient, and it was more the resilience because you just have to trust in yourself. You have to trust in your gut. I had to really believe in myself. I had, and I believe that resilience. What's resilience? I believe we're born with resilience as well, and we can also, you know, become more resilient in challenging situations. So for me, it was about learning. It was about learning resilience because there were some days where I thought not many people came into the store, and I thought, my gosh, how am I going to, you know, pay for everything? It was simple as basic as that.
And how did you get people into the store? Was it just based on people walking by, or did you have any sort of marketing that you did for the store?
You know, I didn't know much about marketing at that stage, knew very little. So, but I was quite, I think having had a performance background, I went to the local papers and, you know, sort of said to them, look, okay, I'm opening a store. So this, you know, would you like to write about me? Dear God, that was so good. And so I got a lot of articles on the store. And then, do you know, on the first day, because I opened in an upmarket area in Melbourne, I was so fortunate. A woman came into the store, and very well dressed woman, and she basically wanted to buy most of my the range of glassware, and I found out that she was the Lord Mayor's. I don't know if you have that. You don't have mayors in the US, do you? But she was the Lord Mayor's wife. So basically, the word got around. So I was just very, very fortunate that I'd used my head. I'd gone into a good area, a top class area. I'd gone into a street where she actually lived. She and her husband lived, and so it was that was important to me. So that's I have to say that's how I marketed through local newspapers, through word of mouth, and through this woman as well telling all her friends.
Well, there's some good information there. So right location. Right niche, right product for the area.
Exactly, and it was, as I said, it was a very upmarket area. My products weren't cheap, and they were quality products. And I can still remember. I do remember this day. And she just, you know, basically took most of my stock of glassware. You know, I don't know what you call it, sort of wine glasses and tumblers and things like that. So I was very pleased.
We call that a happy day.
That was a very happy day.
So then you were recruited by this larger company to run the housewares division? Yes,
because these guys, I remember them coming in, and I knew that they weren't going to, that they were sort of investors or something like that. I could just tell by the way they walked through the store. And then they sent some other people back, and people sort of started going through my store, and then an approach was made a month or so later. And they said what they'd done is they had a fashion background, so they had, and they still have a number of fashion brands here in Australia. And they said to me that they really liked my concept of this boutique-y little store. And I mean, I'll tell you the year it was. It was in the late 70s. So they liked the concept. It was very boutique-y. They bought a tired, sort of, it was an old-fashioned but had been upmarket department store, and they wanted to really reinvigorate the homewares area. They had one problem. This is a really interesting problem. They had a tenant. They had Wedgwood, and I think Wedgwood had a 10-year contract or something like that. And Wedgwood in those days was a very old-fashioned brand. I think they've changed their whole concept now. But the Wedgwood store stood right at the front of their homewares area as you approach the store on the left-hand side. So they knew that they had a problem to get new blood into the store, new people, younger people, more interesting people into the store. So they wanted to put a shop like mine, or a boutique shop like my, I call it Sally's Cook Shop. They wanted to put it right at the front of the store so that they would divert the traffic to the right-hand side and people would be more interested in coming into the store. So that was their concept. And so my boutique, I became an employee with them. So the boutique was placed right at the front of the store. And what I did, it was very French. It was, with baskets everywhere, with plates and bowls stacked on the floor. It was all white, mainly white, and the Creuset cookware. So it sort of had, and then things hanging from the ceiling. So it had a really authentic sort of feel to it, and it was totally the opposite to the Wedgwood store. And we did it. We managed to really change the look of that store to make it very boutique, to make it very current, to make it very present, and to get a whole different group of people into the store. And I mean, they gave me carte blanche. I mean, I was able to go away on buying trips all the time, and sort of scour the world for the best products. And then I also introduced, which had never been done in a department store, cooking classes. But with the other thing I did too was I got a portable kitchen, so I got that sponsored. And then I went to the best chefs in Melbourne, and I asked them if they would come in, and once a week they would do a cooking class, and they all loved it. Because it also gave, I mean, here they are in a big department store. It gave their restaurant, a way of marketing who they were, what they were doing, and we were sold out. So it went along. It's a good marketing idea. You're a marketing person, so I guess you'd get that.
I can understand that. Yep.
Yeah. So it was great because I mean I loved eating out and going to good restaurants, and I met some of the finest chefs in Melbourne, and it's further embellished my love of food and cooking.
And then after that, what was the next transition?
Well, I was poached again by a gourmet cook. They weren't at that stage a gourmet cookware supplier. It was a company that wanted me to go into Taiwan, and we would reproduce French cookware in factories in Taiwan. So that was as I said, that was probably early 80s then. Taiwan at that time was, I have to say, horrible. It was ordinary. It was really a very, Taipei in particular was a really basic country. So I went in there, and we had a factory in a place called Tainan, which was a 3-hour train trip from Taipei. And they reproduced this cookware, and I have to say they reproduced it really, really, really well.
So after you, let's talk about let's go back to after you were poached by the housewares company.
Yes.
You opened up this little boutique store inside of this other store. What was your next business venture?
Okay, the next business venture was when I did the buying for this cookware supplier, and that was the one in Taiwan, where we reproduced French cookware by the container load and sold it into the Target stores. So I did that for a number of years, and after that, what I did was I actually I found that I missed the performing arts world, so I went back and sort of started to look around and find what sort of interesting work was available in the performing arts world. And I saw a job actually advertised by the Australian Ballet, which was the head of their business development area. And even though I hadn't had any experience in finding funding, I thought, look, I do know a lot about running a business. I do know a lot about marketing my business. I want this job, so I did, and eventually I got it. So I headed up the corporate area of the Australian Ballet for 6 years, and that meant that I had to find funding of $1.5 million every year for the Australian Ballet, and that was both nationally and globally. So I basically was in touch and connected with all the movers and shakers of Australia and of the world. So whenever the ballet toured, I found funding, and it was an amazing, fabulous job.
So tell me about business development.
So I went and worked for the Australian Ballet for 6 years, and that was an extraordinary job because I learned a lot from that. I learned a lot from the major CEOs of the world of how they ran their businesses, how they marketed their businesses. I learned, from mixing in a really rarefied society, shall I say, as to how I could sort of eventually, when I left the ballet and do what I'm doing now, I could run, a really successful business. So the Australian Ballet for me was also a way of it was a way of introducing me to the next stage of my career, and moving with royalty, running Princess Diana's gala performance in London, and those sort of things were really exciting for me to be able to basically get in touch with people who were running the world.
Well, you said that you learned some lessons from some of the CEOs and leaders that you interfaced with. What would you say are one or two of those lessons that stand out to you?
Okay, one of the lessons was, and it was something that they all admitted to me, the power of creative thinking. And it was actually a really interesting thing, because as part of the sponsorship, I'd say to someone, to a CEO, look, if you want to come in and watch a rehearsal, come in and watch a rehearsal, et cetera, just almost make the ballet your home. And quite often these guys, because it was guys, would come in to watch a rehearsal, and they'd say to me afterwards, they say, Sally, oh my gosh, I walked into this building feeling really stressed. I felt incredibly stressed. I had a challenge in my business, and now being in this creative environment, I found a way to actually be able to turn around this challenge. And what I thought at that time was, I thought, my gosh, there's got to be a way. I've got to bottle this experience. How do I bottle this experience and take sort of creative thinking? Because I said it was about being in a creative environment that helped them to stop thinking about the challenge that they had in the same way that they were thinking about it, and look at it in a very, very different creative way. So that was one of the lessons that I learned, that creative thinking for corporates, for businesses, is absolutely essential. And the other thing that I learned from them was, and this is an admission that most people in sponsorship and in the arts won't admit, is that it didn't really matter about the performance. It didn't really matter about whether you're doing a Swan Lake, a Sleeping Beauty, the latest, newest ballet, as long as you could actually market and match the production to the type of sponsor that you knew could be interested in that performance. So what I would do is, there might be a company which I did this with, a company that was having trouble getting a planning permit down near the Sydney Opera House. And so I went to that company and I said to them, look, if you're seen to be partners with the Australian Ballet, I'm sure that, that this will help in your, as you move towards your planning permit. And, it's also a smart and a really nice thing to do. So they came on board as well, and they were able to, what they did was that they invited various ministers along to their evenings, and actually the head of this company became the chair of the Australian Ballet only a few years ago as well. So it was really about looking at how to partner organisations. I learnt that these guys really, this guy, one of them in particular, said to me, he said, really, Sally, I don't like the ballet. He said, I do not like it at all. But he said, what the ballet gives me is access to some of the top people in Australia. He said, I can actually connect and communicate with these people in a small group. And he said, that's something that normally I would not be able to do. So I guess that was a lesson for me. It was a lesson for them as well.
Well, you came from a family of architects as well, and you mentioned in your email to me some of the mindset that you've seen architects have in general. Talk to me about that, in terms of what's the mindset that you see from an outside perspective that architects have that holds them back from having greater success.
And look, I'm going to be very, very family orientated now. I notice living in a family of architects was that my dad was a very controlling person. He was, and I think because he came from a family of people that were not even architects. His family ran hotels. They were publicans, and we called them that. I don't know what you call them in the US. They came from Dad came from a very, very basic background. They weren't really into culture, into art, and I'm sure that must have influenced my father. He was a person that architecture was his whole life. There was virtually nothing else. He lived, he breathed for architecture, and I found him a person that was, because he was so controlling. He ran his practice in a way that he was the person that decided what was done, how it was done, and I don't think there was very much input from anyone else. He was a really hard taskmaster. He was also someone that I believe he could have done a lot more. He could have been far more open. He could have been far more open to the people that he had working around him. He became very, very successful. He got an MBE over here, which is, like a Queen's gong for his, contribution to architecture in New Zealand. And, he was a well-known name. But all in all, I found that he kept everything to himself. He really didn't open up to the potential of the people that were working with him. And I have to say, I noticed that my brother's got the same attitude, because my brother is now running the family business, and he's really taken that on. And also, there's only one woman who works in the office. There was only one woman who worked when Dad was around as well. And I find that really a bit challenging. And I look at my brother just running the business and not really expanding in the way that I believe that he could expand. He could be far more open to, especially in Christchurch, to new opportunities. Hey, the city is being rebuilt. There's a lot of new opportunities for architects to market themselves in a smarter, more effective way. But he sort of stayed within that little bubble. And that's something that being in a family of architects, I found that they really, my family stuck to themselves. They stayed within themselves, and I thought that was not a really smart idea.
What would be an alternate that you would suggest? You talk about transparency. How would you suggest someone improve on that model?
On the transparency model, it's really there's two things, and I mean I could also talk about women, and I'm not sure if this is the right time to talk about women, but the transparency model is about partnering too. I mean, I know that that's probably a byproduct of transparency, but hey, in Christchurch, there's the opportunity to partner with other architectural firms. There's an opportunity to look at the new development that's happening. I know I read an article in I think it was the New Yorker or the Vanity Fair, about a group of architects, I think in New York, who came into countries that had disasters like Christchurch with the earthquake, and they partnered with local architects. So I actually emailed this group of architects, and I suggested that they connect with my family in New Zealand. Spoke to my brother about that, but nothing ever happened. And I got an email back from the guys in New York saying, yes, we're really interested. So I believe that it's really important to look at how do you partner? How do you get the best out of what you've got to offer, and how can you use the best of what someone else has got to offer, so you can be open about what the opportunities are, and also it helps with financially. You're going to be far more successful.
So partnering, is there anything else that comes to mind?
In being transparent or growing the business, or
in you mentioned that you're looking at the business that you saw growing up, which was an architecture firm. Yeah. You hinted that you had some ideas about how it could be run better, about some things, and you mentioned partnering being one of them. Was there anything else that come to mind in terms of improving that business?
There's quite a lot. With the business that my family have, they stick to homes, that they stick to residential, they stick to basically residential property. And I feel that it's something that they feel very comfortable. And sure, look, it is a niche, but there's so much more that they can do, especially, and I keep going back to Christchurch, apartment blocks have to be built. There has to be a new style of architecture put together. There needs to be also retail. There needs to be more diversity as well with retail. And one of the things that I believe is really important is, and I've often thought my brother could be doing this, is partnering with developers who, I mean, it's done here in Australia, it's done globally, looking at sort of, okay, how they can partner with a developer, bring their design, their sense of design, their sense of great buildings to whatever that developer wants to do, and to take that forward.
Sally, you coach people on giving standout presentations, and I'm just pulling this from your website here.
Sure.
You say there's some keys, and you have a strategy for developing inner mindset balances off your website. How to develop inner mindset balance and strong self belief that enables presenters to feel relaxed and in control, less fearful and anxious. Let's talk about, what are your 2 to 3 top suggestions for creating standout presentations?
Okay. The first one is you have to give a presentation that you're really passionate about. I mean, I know it sounds like the simplest, most basic thing, but it is really, really, really important to find topics that excite something within you, that you feel a true passion and an excitement. And I'll give you a story. It's a bit like a performer. You're a bit like a performer. Well, you are a performer. If a flautist like I was gets up on stage and just plays the notes, your audience is going to go, well, that was okay, but we weren't really connected with you. If you get up on stage and you play that music with the passion that sits inside of yourself, you're going to have a very different connection with the audience. And even if you stuff it up, it doesn't matter. The audience will still connect. So the first thing I'd say is, when you decide you want to give a presentation, think about the topics. Think about the topics that really inspire you, that excite you and excite you. Because if they don't, you're going to get up there and you're just going to be pretty ordinary. So think about that. Also think about, what is it that within you that you want to get out? Don't be afraid of what you've got to say. And this is something that I talk to a lot of women about, finding your voice of authority, finding your authentic voice, and really deciding that you will get out there and you'll talk about what you believe in, what excites you, and again, what inspires you, and be prepared to be a little bit controversial. And I think that is incredibly important, because then you will get an audience reaction. You'll get people in an audience who will come back to you. So there's those two things. It's firstly, look at what you're passionate about. Look at your voice of authority. What is it that makes you stand out? And I find that a lot of people say to me, oh, but if I come from that voice, what will people think of me? Well, there's going to be two ways. They're either going to like you or they're not. But if you don't do it, you won't ever know.
So get out there and do it.
Look, that's a really good point. And also get out and do it, even if you don't feel you're ready. And I always remember years ago, a coach said to me, he said, Sally, look, you've got to start at some stage. And I'll give a really good example about speaking. I started running webinars a few years ago, and I was a little bit technically challenged. And I remember my coach said to me, he just said, look, just get out and do it, because you've got to start somewhere. And I remember doing it, and Enoch, I was so nervous. I was more nervous than being on stage, because it was a technical thing as well. And so I thought, my God, I'm going to stuff this up. Anyhow, I got through it, and I remember at the end I got two clients out of it. One client who runs the Melbourne Business School, who said it was one of the best presentations she'd ever heard. I thought it was shocking, but obviously it wasn't. And I got another client from New Zealand who was the sister of the Lord of the Rings producer. So I got some pretty high level clients out of that so-called just get out and do it webinar. so for me, what I learned was that we can be our own worst enemy. I mean, when I was on that webinar, if I could have found a way to get off that webinar, I would have got off it, because I was just being very critical of myself. And as a performer, I always believe I've got to give a really good performance. But that was one of the best examples of just do it, because we quite often, what the resources that sit within us come forward. And if you're really genuine, and I mean, I did say it was my first webinar. I was really honest. I said, it's my first webinar. I may stuff up some things, but look, please, stay with me if you want to stay with me, and I'm going to get through this. So to me, it was about being honest as well. And I believe in getting back to speaking and performances, if you're honest and you're on stage and you stuff something up, just say it. People will connect more. And I've seen dancers do this. When I was with the Australian Ballet, I've seen dancers, I've seen one dancer slip and fall because there was some dry ice that hadn't been swept away on the floor. She got up and off she went. She kept dancing.
That's a great metaphor. And it ties into the title of your book, which is Creating Encores, a wake-up call for women leaders.
Yes.
Tell me about the message of your book.
The message of the book is that, so the message basically is that we are responsible for reigniting and reinventing our life as much as we can do. And I like to say, and I'll be really straight about this, there's no excuse. There's no excuse for being in a career, being in a business, being in a life that has stopped just because we say get to the age of around 40 and we go, look, I'm bored, I don't know what to do, and being a bit of a victim. For me, it's about really looking at how can I reinvigorate, how can I reinvent my life. It's a bit like a marriage, get to a certain stage in your marriage and you go, okay, is this what I signed up for? And, there is an easy way out, leave the marriage, or there's a way out of looking at, well, how can I redevelop this marriage, or how can I redevelop my career? And for me, the book is about, and it comes from the times, as I've said, being in the performing arts, where I've had to basically stop a career that I was passionate about, a career that I absolutely loved, and think about, well, what's the next thing that I love? What am I passionate about? So the book has that message that we can be in a career that when we were at university, we thought, fantastic, this is exactly what I want to do. Get into the job, spend 10 years there. Go, well, is this what I signed up for? Is my ladder against the wrong wall? What am I doing? How can I change that? And Enoch, I want to say at this stage too, it's not necessarily about leaving. It's not necessarily about leaving your job. It's a lot about sort of breathing new life. And look at it in the terms of architecture. It's a bit like you've got a house that's got good bones. It may be fairly old, but it's got good bones, and you go, well, I want to do something with that house. I want to put a new kitchen. I want to put a new bathroom in. I want to add on a bit to a part of the house. I want to make this house look a little bit different. And I want it to be a house that I love coming home to. It's a house that really inspires me. I give that metaphor to people in their careers, and I say, look at what you're doing, a bit like a home that's a little bit shabby, but it's got good bones. It's really got good bones. So what you've just got to do is redecorate it. You've got to redecorate. As I said, put a new kitchen. It's amazing what a new kitchen and a new bathroom does. Put that in. So my message is about, okay, for most people, stay in your career, but look at new ways that you can reinvigorate it. For some people, yes, it is about moving out, and it's about finding a new career. So it's about being creative about it, looking at how you can redecorate your house in an architectural way too.
How do you suggest someone reinvigorate their career?
Okay, so what they have to do is to really go back to the passion. Go back and find out what it is that really excites and inspires you. You can't go into your head. You have to go into what is it that sits inside of yourself. You go, wow, I absolutely love doing this. Now, whether this is something that's in the current career that you're in, or whether it's not. And also, I suggest to people also to go out of your comfort zone. So I'll give an example of a client that I had recently, and she was in in a job actually with a building company of all things, and she'd got to a stage where she was totally bored. She wasn't paid very well, but she'd been there for too long. She'd been there for about 10 years. And she came to me for coaching, and she said, look, I really hate my job. I don't know what to do. I go to work, come home, go to work, come home. My life is really boring. So what I do with all my clients right at the start of the coaching is I get them to put a vision board together. So I get them I use music, because music takes you out of your sort of left brain, puts you into your creative brain. I get people to start imagining what they can do. Once that happens, it's sort of like it frees up something in the brain. People start to think about possibilities, about potential, about excitement, about what else they can do. So I do that in the first session, and I'd suggest to people that are listening to this podcast is that they start to think about what is it that excites and inspires, but also what makes you challenged. What is it that's out of your comfort zone? What is it that's something that you would absolutely love to do? So I did this with my client that I was talking about, and she went, oh my gosh, I've suddenly realized that I really am stuck. She moved like a rocket. She then said, okay, I've got to get another job. I need to get it several levels up. And she went off and saw recruiters, went to recruitment agencies. Within 3 months, she had another job. She came into me on the day that she was going for one of the interviews. She had a pair of gorgeous high heels. She had a new outfit, and she looked stunning. And she just said, Sally, I'm going to get this job. She did. She got it. And so for her, it was really about getting her out of that comfort zone, that comfort zone of going to work, coming home, going to work, coming home, being bored, very capable person, but she was in a job that really wasn't it was a large company, but her job wasn't going anywhere. Did the webinar, did the vision board, and went, oh my gosh, I've just realized what I'm not doing. It was sort of like it gave her a second wind, and she went and said, well, okay, I've got to start doing something with my life. So now she's in this role where I think she's probably now paid about twice what she was paid a few years ago. And it's a family company. It's still in the building industry, but she's really appreciated, and that's really important.
So Sally, how can people find out more about you and your work and connect with you?
So what I suggest is that they go onto my website, and then they email me. So if I give you my email address now, is that a smart idea?
Sure.
Okay, so it's Sally at creatingencores.co, just .co. And, just tell me a bit about where you're at, what's challenging you, what's stopping you at the moment. And, especially when you've been in a career that you were passionate about, say, a few years ago, and that passion's gone out. Because, as I said, it's not necessarily about leaving that career. It's about really reinvigorating it. It's about, putting new music, composing new music for your career, looking at a new way of moving ahead. So that's the best way. Go onto my website, which is Creating Encores, www.creatingencores.co, and then you can find out a bit more about me.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Sally Arnold, for being on the Business of Architecture.
Thank you, Enoch. It was great to talk with you. You go well.
And that is a wrap. Thank you for listening today. If you're looking for more time, freedom, impact, and income as an architect, get instant access to my free 4-part architect profit map by visiting freearchitectgift.com. Today's podcast is sponsored by AIA Advantage partner BQE Software, the makers of ArchiOffice. ArchiOffice is the only office and project management software designed specifically for architects. It helps you manage people and projects while you focus on designing great architecture. So whether you're working remotely or on-site, ArchiOffice allows you to monitor the status of your projects and tasks and send out invoices in an accurate and timely manner. Get your fully functional 15-day trial of ArchiOffice by going to businessofarchitecture.com/demo. The views expressed on the show by my guests do not represent those of the host, and I make no representation, promise, guarantee, pledge, warranty, contract, bond, or commitment except to help you conquer the world.